Hello everyone, this is Emad Hosseinpour and I'm going to present our recent research. The title of the research is Comparison of Hollow Steel Tube and Web Opening Shear Connector Behavior in Composite Slim Flow. This research is led by Associate Prof. Dr. Shahrizan Baharom, the head of the Civil Engineering Program at National University of Malaysia. And this research is submitted to Eurosteel 2021. In this research, different types of the flow system, a composite flow system has been reviewed, and the different type of the shear connector which has been proposed by other researcher has been studied, and the problem been investigated, and the objective of this research is set to overcome those problems so that experimental work has been designed and conducted in the civil engineering lab at National University of Malaysia, and the findings of that work has been discussed and summarized in the discussion. Downstem floor system is a conventional type where uh, the concrete slab is placed on top of the steel beam, and the composite action between that concrete slab and the steel beam is provided through the shear stud connector welded on top of the steel beam. In this system, ducting and the service pipe running through the web opening, which could provide through the web of the steel beam. For the slim flow system as an economical system which is proposed, the lower flow slab depths where it's supported on the lower flange, which eliminates the use of the downstand beams, which it gives a flat look to the slim flow system. Different types of the shear connector have been introduced and developed by other researchers for this system, where it can be summarized as the web opening, heated stud, and the tie bar, which that tie bar placed on the center, at the top, and the bottom of the web opening shear connector to enhance the shear strength of those type of the connectors. But the problems of those shear connectors is the heated stud fail due to the welding fracture and concrete splitting failure. Those failure modes limit the ultimate shear strength of the slim flow system. Considerable stress develops in web opening shear connectors. In filled concrete fail due to the knife flow produced by the thin web of the steel beam on the direct shear force. The tie bar, which placed at the center of the infield web opening shear connector, couldn't improve the shear strength of those type of the connector. Same goes to the tie bar, which placed at the top. It ruptured when punched by the steel beam web, and the tie bar which placed on at bottom could not prevent the splitting failure of those type of connectors. So that the objectives of this research is to evaluate the research behavior and failure mechanism of the web opening and hollow steel tube shear connectors on the direct shear force, and the second objective is to evaluate the ductility behavior of the proposed shear connectors and to compare it with other types of the connectors through ductility index factor. And the third objective is to examine the ability of energy absorption for the shear connectors, which that can be calculated by estimating the total area under the load slip curve. Experimental work comprised three different groups. The group 1 as a reference group where the shear stud welded to the web of the steel beam in both sides, and two different infill concrete of 25 and 40 megapascal has been casted. And the second group comprised six numbers of web opening and with different geometry of circular, square, and rectangular shape, and with the two different concrete strengths. Group 3 comprised 8 numbers of the hollow steel tube shear connectors with different geometry and two different concrete strengths. The details of that specimen can be found in the attached drawings. The shear stud size is 19 mm in shank and 30 mm in head, where the opening size for the circular shape is 140 mm in diameter, for the square shape 125 times 125, and for the rectangular shape is 100 times 150. And for group 3, the same size of the hollow steel tube has been selected. That steel tube being welded through the opening, so that same size of the hollow steel tube created as the hollow steel tube shear connectors, where the thickness of the tube is 5 mm. The steel beam being selected through universal columns 254 times 254 times 8.6 mm, as it is suggested by Eurocode. The specimens has been casted horizontally as it's suggested by EC4 and been hooked up to the steel frame to set up the test and set up the hydraulic jack and the load cell to read that loading process, and also the LVDTs has been set on the steel beam to measure the vertical displacement. All those reading has been recorded by data logger device. The experimental result for the shear stud connector shows the failure of the connector itself and the concrete splitting failure, which reduce the shear strength of those type of the connectors. Whereas web opening connectors are failed due to the knife load produced by thin web of the steel beam. The compressive failure of the concrete top is recorded as the main failure, where it split through the openings by the concrete splitting failure. Whereas the hollow steel tube connector as the innovative type of connector is proposed by our team shows no failure occurred in the tube or in the connector itself. No failure recorded. The failure of the concrete underneath was recorded as a compressive failure and concrete splitting through the concrete slab, which caused the crack growth through the crack line. The load slip behavior of the web opening shear connector shows the minimum shear strength achieved by the web opening type, whereas the highest shear strength achieved by hollow steel tube shear connector with the infill concrete strength of 40 megapascal. And the shear stud connector record the higher or the larger slip, whereas the shear load was lower than all types of the hollow steel tube shear connectors. A simple plastic analysis has been used to investigate the ductility behavior of the shear connectors. The displacement at the yield defined as delta y, and delta max define the failure point of the shear connector at the load drop 10% below the ultimate load. The ability of energy absorption capacity for the tested shear connector can be calculated by estimating the total area under the load slip curve, where the circular and square type of the hollow steel shear connector gain better EA capacity compared to the shear stud as the reference connector and the web opening specimens. The result is showing that the ductility factor for the shear stud connector is the highest among all other types of the connectors, whereas the energy absorption capacity of the square-shaped hollow steel tube connector is recorded the highest EA among all other types of the shear connector. In all cases, the web opening connector record the lowest value as a ductility index and EA capacity among all other shear connectors. The conclusion of this research is the web square shape of opening shear connector achieve almost 6% higher shear strength than that of circular and rectangular shape. The hollow steel tube shear connectors carried a shear load 3 times larger than shear stud and 8 times more than the web square opening. The infill concrete in web opening crushed at top and split at the web opening, where no failure on hollow steel tube connector been recorded. Energy absorption capacity of the hollow steel tube connectors improved by 23% compared with the shear stud connector as a reference connector, where the lowest value was recorded by web opening connectors. A square shape of hollow steel tube connector with the lower grade concrete of 25 MPa record higher EA improvement ratio with 22.6% compared with the shear stud and 233% compared with web square shape of opening. The significant contribution of this research is high strength shear connector with no failure in concrete itself. Minimize the stress developing in concrete due to larger bearing area of the concrete underneath. Could stiffen the steel web and avoiding it from creeper and fracture and avoid the service duct failure by a steel beam web by adding the hollow steel tubes in through their web openings. And then optimum shape of the web opening and hollow steel tube shear connectors being investigated in terms of ultimate shear strength, energy absorption capacity, and the ductility factor. Thank you very much for your kind attention.